Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today called Vicarious Trauma for Interpreters. Thank you so much for registering and attending. There was quite a lot of interest for this webinar. We have over 170 attendees today, so thank you to every single one of you. Before I get started and hand it over to Dr. Miranda Lai, just a little bit of housekeeping. You've got in the handout section the AUSIT Code of Ethics as usual. There's also going to be a couple of polls, so a couple of questions Dr. Miranda will be asking you throughout the webinar. So please make sure to take part in that. Keep an eye on your screen for those questions. The certificates of attendance for today's webinar will be emailed out to you by the end of the week, okay? And you can read on that which category you can claim this webinar from as well for your professional development requirements. Also, a link to the recording of this webinar will be made available to you tomorrow as well, so you can watch it whenever you like again in the future. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Miranda Lai. Now, Dr. Miranda Lai is a senior lecturer in the Translating and Interpreting Studies at RMIT University. Now, she's no stranger to us. She's delivered many training materials for us before, and as well as designed them for us too. She has published widely within the public service interpreting and its training. She's done a lot of work in police interpreting, public service interpreting, as well as ethics for translators and interpreters. And she has also conducted research on vicarious trauma and its effect on interpreters, one in the year 2015 and one that has just concluded this year. So fresh out of the oven research for you as well. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Miranda Lai. Miranda, thank you so much for joining us today, and over to you.
No problem. Thank you so much, Fatih, for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. It's such a honor for me to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. Vicarious trauma, this topic has been my passion. Therefore, it is really good to be able to be here to share with you what I know and what we as practitioners should be aware of. So for today's talk, what I will propose to do is a few things. First of all, of course, I will share with you and explain what is vicarious trauma. And then I'll talk about the signs of vicarious trauma and why do we interpreting and translating practitioners need to be aware of this particular issue. And then I'll share with you some self-care tips. And if we have time, it depends on how we go. I don't want to rush along the way. I want to take the time to explain things well. And a reminder, if along the way, if you have any questions, please do feel free to pop in your questions, and then I'll try to answer as much as possible. So towards the end, if we still have time, then I'll share with you the couple studies that we've done at RMIT University, which I've been involved in. All right, so first of all, talking about vicarious trauma, to be honest, 6-7 years ago, when I came across this term, honestly, I had no idea what it meant. So when you look at this couple words, if you don't know what it is, please don't feel embarrassed, because honestly, I didn't have any idea. So first of all, if we look at vicarious trauma, normally I like to kind of dissect them into, two separate words. I'll go to trauma first. Normally with this word, we probably don't have too many problems understanding what trauma is. Normally, when we refer to trauma, we might talk about physical injuries, okay? You are injured, you are traumatized by a violent attack or an accident. But sometimes we might also refer to trauma as emotional, something emotional. It might be severe emotional shock or pain caused by external upsetting experience. So in other words, trauma, when we talk about it, you might experience physical trauma, sometimes it's emotional. Of course, when we talk about vicarious trauma, normally we are talking about the emotional side. All right. Now, this word, vicarious, like I say, 6-7 years ago, I had no idea what this word meant. So, a vicarious feeling, what is it? It is a feeling that is experienced by you watching, listening to, or reading about other people's experience rather than by doing that something yourself. So I hope that makes sense. So you might experience things vicariously. That means that you heard about it, you watched something, or you read about it, but then you don't necessarily, you are not the actual victim of the incident, if you like. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives you a rough idea what the words mean. Now, how was vicarious trauma discovered? This has to bring us back to the 1980s. A few researchers looked into first responders. So by that we mean, people like police officers, firefighters, search and rescue personnel, and paramedics, etc. These are the people who normally are the first ones to be present at an incident to attend to those victims of traumatic event, catastrophic event, things like that. Now, with these people, they are routinely exposed to emotionally challenging and unpredictable situations because of the things they do. You can imagine police officers, responders, firefighters, search and rescue personnel. That's what they do. And they would be regularly experiencing life-threatening and potentially traumatic situations involving the dead and the injured. Yeah, if you imagine. Yeah. And also, not only those victims themselves, they sometimes would also have to deal with the victims' families. Okay. Now, over time, this work context might overwhelm these individuals and result in high levels of stress in them. So researchers started to find that, look, these people have developed traumatic responses very similar to the victims themselves. So when we talk about that, they are talking about emotional exhaustion, sleeplessness, physical fatigue, or fear to safety, or even sometimes they would have intrusive thoughts or intrusive images. So you can imagine that in terms of the victims, we totally understand that they might feel emotionally disturbed, very exhausted, they couldn't sleep. But then, this is what we are saying, even the responders, because of the work contexts they are in, they started to develop very similar symptoms, such as their victims, okay? And that's why this secondary traumatization was first coined or first raised by these researchers to refer to professions who have symptoms like trauma victims themselves. And these are the victims that they work with. Okay, so when we refer to this secondary traumatization, it kind of is against the idea that the victims themselves, of course, they experience the trauma firsthand, whereas these first responders, the term refers to their secondary experience of the trauma because they help those clients, if you like, in their various job capacities. Now, the next decade, in the 1990s, again, the research pushed on. They kind of changed their focus to therapists. They looked at psychotherapists and find something really interesting. Now, I don't know, some of you in the audience might have interpreted in psychotherapy sessions, and you will probably know that psychotherapy actually involves talk therapy, okay? So the therapists talk to their clients, trying to listen to them and trying to help them to overcome the trauma or the psychological impacts and psychological disturbances arose from their past life experiences. Now, in the 1990s, researchers found in psychotherapists, those are the people who treated victims of violence, for example, child abuse, war, genocide, rape, etc., all very traumatic situations. So these therapists, they engage with their clients by listening to their very graphic description of horrific events. They would have to bear witness to people's cruelty described by their clients. And by that, they witnessed traumatic reenactments through the description of their clients. So over time, therapists felt some changes in the way they felt about themselves, about others, and about the world. The effects of these changes permeates through their inner world and relationships. What they used to be able to enjoy, with their family, with their friends, or socially, they don't find joy anymore. Okay, they find, or sometimes it might be that they used to be very content with their lives, or they used to feel perfectly safe in their daily lives, but they don't feel that anymore. Something's kind of inside themselves has changed. Okay. We have to know that the effects that I described, they do not appear just because the therapist treated one client. No, okay? So it is actually cumulative over a period of time and over many different clients that they treated. Okay, so you can see that it's not one client, it's not one incident that they treated their clients. No, it's not one session, it's over time and over many clients. And therefore, in the 1990s, after these observations, vicarious traumatization was coined to describe the transformation within the therapists as a result of their emotional investment in their clients and in their clients' traumatic experiences, because they were there trying to help them to regain their confidence, to regain their control of their clients' lives. But then in return, they get this secondary traumatization through their clients. And this is coined as vicarious traumatization or vicarious trauma, if you like. All right, I quite like to give people this lay definition, if you like, of vicarious trauma. Now that we've been through a bit of a historical description of how it came about, I find this American Counseling Association definition of vicarious trauma quite useful, okay? And it's easy for us to understand in a few words. So in their description, vicarious trauma is the emotional residue from working with people by listening to the telling of their trauma stories. And in that way, you as the therapist or you as the counselor witness the pain, the fear, and the terror that trauma survivor has endured. Okay, so I hope this lay definition kind of makes sense to you. And of course, by giving you a lay description, moving on, I'll give you a clinical definition. There are three key elements, if you like, to describe vicarious trauma. There are three, okay? The first one is, I kind of alluded to it just a moment ago, it has to be repeated exposure, okay? So it's not just one incident or one therapy session. So it has to be repeated exposure to the client's traumatic materials. Second, this experience has to create negative permanent transformation in your inner experience. So the point is that the change within you or the transformation within you has to be permanent and it's negative, okay? And then the third point is that such change is in terms of the core aspects of you, okay? The way you look at things, the way you feel about yourself, the way you perceive the world. So it's profound. And to the extent, the change is profound to the extent that your functioning is actually impacted. So if you look at vicarious trauma, a diagnosis, if you like, would have to compose of these three elements. You have to have repeated exposure to your client's traumatic materials. That's the first one. And then it has to kind of create a negative permanent transformation in you. And then the third point is that it has to be so profound that your functioning is impacted. All right, so now it comes to my question one. I want people to think about or just have a guess. The question is, if we could launch the question, Fatih.
Yep.
For our audience, that's it here. So I want people to have a guess. Which of the following professions have featured in the vicarious trauma literature over the past 3 decades since it was identified? Have a guess. It might be multiple answers, or you can pick just one if you think there is only one of them. So it's up to you. Have a guess.
Take a guess. Can I take a guess too, please, Miranda?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I can choose more than one. Yep.
You can choose. It's multiple answers. Oops, I'm giving you a
you just
hint.
gave me a tip.
Yep.
Yes. Attendees, please, if you can select one or more of the following.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting some 36% of you have voted.
Okay.
I know we can do better than that. Come on, let's get interactive.
And then the reason why I wanted people to have a guess about, which professions have featured in the vicarious trauma literature is really to kind of have a sense for ourselves that it's not specific to any, one or two professions. It is actually quite widespread. Later on, I would, yeah.
Sorry, apparently the system is only allowing for one answer. So unfortunately, our attendees can't select multiple.
Okay, that's
so
all right. Then
we will have to see.
That's okay. Then we can probably see which profession is the one that people think the most likely one.
Yep. So can you see the results, Miranda?
Let me see.
Under polls, so I've got here 25% of the vote goes towards nurses.
25%.
Yep, so 25% have said nurses, 60% have said psychotherapists.
Yeah.
3% have said teachers, 3% have said judges, 9% have said translators. So the big majority have picked psychotherapists, followed by nurses, and then translators.
Oh, now I can see that. Yep.
There we go.
All right. Thank you so much for participating in this. Actually, if I were to, I'm just going to come back to my, there we go. Sorry. Yep. All right. Now, thank you for the answers. I'm going to share with you the professions that have featured in the literature. They are actually quite a few. And I must say that my list here is not exhaustive. There you go. Firefighters, so first responders, so people, firefighters, ambulance workers, nurses, yes, indeed, it features. I think in the answers, a lot of people think nurses do get vicarious trauma. Yes, indeed. Therapists, yes. Psychotherapists, yes. Social workers. People probably forget about, social workers. I mean, I didn't have the options. I didn't have an option there. However, if you think of what social workers normally do, they will be involved in, working with people who might have traumatic past. Therefore, social workers also feature very extensively in the vicarious trauma literature. Law enforcement, your police officers, goes without saying. Judges, okay, this might surprise a lot of people. But then if you think about what judges do, they sit in their judges bench listening to sometimes, horrific cases day in, day out, family violence, violence incidents, or, assault or rape or anything, So judges, they also feature very kind of in the recent literature, if you like. Actors, people probably forget that actors, when they, of course, comedians, they wouldn't get vicarious trauma. But then if you think about actors who need to portray human suffering or, hurt or traumatic situations, and if they do that day in, day out, they might get vicariously traumatized. Yeah. And then lastly, of course, it's interpreters. Okay, I must say though, translators, for those of you in the audience who are translators, you are not immune. Okay, translators, sometimes you might get exposed to traumatic materials. Say, for example, you might get given a, say, coroner's report, then you have to translate it. Or you might need to translate a statement from someone who is seeking asylum, and then the person in the statement recounts traumatic events in his or her past life. So these will be the materials that you might come across. So vicarious trauma, at the end of the day, when we talk about TNI practitioners, it's not exclusive to interpreters. It's only that so far in the literature, the attention has been paid more to interpreters, but we just need to be a bit mindful that translators in the audience, you also need to have some awareness and then guard against vicarious trauma, because, one day or another, you might come across traumatic materials. Okay, now, therefore, why do we need to talk about it? And of course, when I started the talk, I kind of share with you how vicarious trauma was identified, and then it didn't start from interpreters and translators. Rather, it was from those first responders and then those so-called helping professions. Your nurses, your therapists, your psychotherapists, your social workers, etc., etc. All right. Now, if witnessing their clients' trauma can cause such deep effect on these helping professions, there is no reason to assume that an interpreter or translator will be immune to such experience, because we work in exactly the same setting. Wouldn't you agree? A social worker wouldn't be able to communicate with their trauma client without you if they don't speak the same language. Yeah. Therefore, these Auslan, Bontempo and Malcolm, these are outstanding Auslan, Australian Sign Language researchers. They have this observation that there is no reason whatsoever to assume that we interpreters or translators are immune to this same experience. Okay, and we have to view vicarious trauma as an occupational hazard. because I mean, in your private life, there is no such thing. You might get traumatized, but then it's not vicarious trauma, okay? Therefore, we are talking about this in the context of occupational hazard, or it's, we need to be aware that it is an occupational hazard, and we need to, and sometimes people regard it as cost of caring or career-related cost. You might hear people referring to vicarious trauma, particularly for those helping professions, as cost of caring or care-related cost. And therefore, we need a very good occupational health and safety framework to guarantee best practice in order to protect ourselves. So that is the rationale. It is important that you are aware of this concept of vicarious trauma and then take active measures to protect yourself against it. So that's the whole point. Now, I hasten to add that I am not trying to be an alarmist, okay? I want people to be alert, but then please do not be alarmed. I'm borrowing John Howard here. So why do I say that? The reason is not everyone who works with traumatized clients would necessarily develop vicarious trauma. At the end of the day, incident rate is actually low. So I hear a sigh of relief, I think, from the audience. So yes, people, audience, please don't be overly alarmed. Okay, we need to be aware, but then the fact is, from research, the fact is that incident rate is actually low. But the point is that we need to be aware of it. Okay, not everyone who works with traumatized material or client would necessarily develop vicarious trauma. While many helping professions have reported signs or symptoms of vicarious trauma, if you look at the way they function in their various job contexts, their functioning hasn't been shown to be significantly affected. Okay, so again, this is reassuring that yes, indeed, from time to time, people might feel, a bit down or, sad because today I've interpreted or I've, in a social work context or in a psychotherapy context, people might feel down, but that doesn't mean that one, they've got vicarious trauma, two, it is to the extent that it'll impact their functioning. No, it's not like that. Yeah? You need to be mindful of actually other risk factors. For example, your own trauma history. You might have something in the past that's troubling you. You might have some mental issues that you need to address, or currently you have some personal issues that are troubling you. So again, although incident rate is low, there might be other factors at play. So we just need to, look at the whole picture. The most important message here really is our awareness of the issue. Awareness really is the key. And please watch out for the signs and reach out for help. So up to this point, people might start asking me, Miranda, what are the signs of vicarious trauma? And what are the signs that I need to look out for? Yes, Fatih.
I do have some questions and comments, Miranda, in regards to who can be affected by vicarious trauma. I've got a couple of comments on that. Someone said emergency room doctors. We have had a practitioner with us today who has translated material that has contained war crimes. I guess that could also cause vicarious trauma. We have another question from an interpreter. So being human, you would empathize with the client. This is normal, I guess. It's to be expected to last at least during the appointment only, right? Once I leave the appointment, should it be fine?
This is why we were saying, remember those three elements there. Precisely, and this colleague is is right in saying that, yes, indeed, if you go into an interpreting assignment and the content is just so distressing that you feel really affected by it, normally you go out, you might try to find some debriefing, and then you might do something to relax yourself, and normally most of us might be fine. But then if you have continuous exposure, or like I say, if you have some underlying other risk factors, then that's something that you need to pay attention to. So yes, overall, indeed, comparing to other professions, I have to say that, look, interpreters like you and I, we don't go out every single day into situations where you might come across traumatic content. Yeah, today you might come across it. Tomorrow you might be a perfectly happy occasion. It might be a mother having a newborn baby, things like that. Therefore, it's unlike, say, psychotherapists or social workers. When they are engaged, in most cases, it'll be, more likely to be clients who have experienced trauma in the past, who are in a bad place that their assistance is needed. Okay. Whereas for us interpreters, I suppose our exposure is probably kind of spread out, if you like. Interpreters and translators might be exposed, but then your exposure is more spread out than those other helping professions. So that's something we probably also have to keep in mind.
I've got another couple of questions here, but I think you're going to address those in your upcoming slides. What are the steps to take? What are the steps to take care of oneself in relation to vicarious trauma? And would you be able to suggest any literature on the topic? And I think you'll be addressing these, both of these questions in the upcoming slides anyway.
Indeed. So without further ado, let me come back to the slide. All right, so signs of vicarious trauma. There are many aspects that we need to kind of be mindful. So I've divided them into a few different aspects for us to follow a bit easier. So physiologically, you might start feeling fatigued, or you might have trouble falling asleep, or you might find yourself overeating or undereating, losing appetite, or you might find that you started to develop headaches, rashes, or ulcers, etc. Yeah, so that's in terms of your physiology. Now, emotionally, you might feel, I beg your pardon, this keeps running away. All right, emotionally, you used to be a fairly stable person, but then now you start to feel free-floating irritation. You get angry easily. You might feel jumpiness, or you might find that it's very difficult for you to talk about feelings or being close to others. You might have last feelings of grief, or you might feel anxious, or you feel lasting sadness. Okay, or something that you used to feel joy, but you can't enjoy them anymore. Okay, or you might start feeling dissatisfaction with your own life, or you have a sense of hopelessness. This is in terms of your emotional side of things. Now, behaviorally, there are also some manifestations that we need to pay attention to. You might find that you are kind of these days, you don't want to socialize too much. You are withdrawn from your family or from your community. You might increase use of alcohol or even harmful substances, or you might engage in risky behavior, or you avoid people, or you avoid certain tasks. Okay, so behaviorally, you feel something's kind of changed. Moving on to cognitive side of things, in our research, people indeed told us that they dreamed about their clients and the situations that they interpreted for their clients. Okay, therefore, you would dream about these unhappy things. You might have persistent intrusive thoughts, or you started to feel, you have doubts about safety. okay? Or you become very cynical, you become negative. You might also feel difficulty in concentrating on whatever you do, or you feel that your memory has been impacted, or it is hard for you to make decisions on your simple daily things. You stand in front of a counter trying to order your lunch, but all of a sudden you can't even decide whether you are going to go for your chicken or going for your kebab. Yeah, so something just simple in your daily life, all of a sudden you find it difficult to make decisions. And lastly, in terms of your work, the signs are, you might find that these days you don't have motivation to work, to get up and go to work. You might find that you make up excuses, you become absent from work, you might overwork, you might underwork, you might feel there is no point working, you don't feel satisfaction that you used to feel from work. And lastly, you might find difficulty separating your work from your private life. All right, now, all these are what we need to pay attention to in terms of your body, your emotion, your behavior, and also the way you see things, the way you perceive things. And lastly, also in terms of your work. Okay, so these are the signs, hopefully, that give you directions to pay attention to. Now, when we have a rough idea of the signs that we have to kind of look out for, you might then ask me, what are the impacts if I see the signs, and if very unfortunately, if I acquire vicarious trauma, what are the impacts? Now, I've divided them into the personal front and also in terms of your professional performance. Now, on your personal front, it goes without saying that it might affect your emotional and physical well-being. It might change your relationships with your family and your friends. Okay, so these are, remember we talked about the price you have to pay, the price of caring. So that's on your personal front. And on your professional front, it might affect your performance and your functioning, remember? And then, worst of all, it can result in errors, in judgment and mistakes. That's really serious. If it affects you in your functioning to the extent that you might make professional judgment in a wrong way, okay, or you might have mistakes in your professional practice. That is really serious. Okay, so these are the impacts if you are negatively impacted by vicarious trauma. Now, a observation, if you like, that I'd like to share with you. If we look across a lot of professions, many other professions have formal supervision, formal channel for the workers. For example, social workers, nurses, counselors, psychotherapists, they all have their formal channels to seek supervision and debrief within their organization or within their professional organization. However, for interpreters, there really isn't no ready avenues for us to do these things. That is why we are here talking about it, because we really need to get a bit organized. We need to be, first of all, of course, be aware of it, then understand the impacts, and then trying to figure out where we can get debrief, where we can seek supervision, and where we can find support. Okay, so that again is a very important message I'd like to share with people here. So what I would like to say is that, look, if you feel that you are impacted by the traumatic client contents, that you interpret over a period of time, you feel you are impacted, the most important thing is please reach out. We shouldn't be, people have always said that, interpreters and translators, we are of a lonely profession. You go out, you interpret, then you go home. If you are a translator, you stay home, you do your translation in front of your computer. We don't really get to see our colleagues a lot. Therefore, when we feel these emotional impacts from the contents that we deal with in our professional capacity, what do? We say, please reach out. Now, I think this is the second question I'd like to ask people to chip in your thoughts. Can you talk to people about the distress you feel from your interpreting assignments? What do people think? Yes or no?
Please take part in the poll again, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, we've got answers coming in. And Miranda, if I could just ask you to either change the position of your camera or we are losing your lovely, beautiful face. The camera's cutting off your forehead.
Ah, I see. All right. Let me see. Because I'm losing my image myself. So I have no idea how I look.
I'll let you look amazing. You look amazing, but just, we're not seeing all of you.
Oh, I see. Is this better? No?
I'll let you know. At the moment, I can only see the poll.
Ah, yeah, exactly. All right, no worries.
All right, we've got some comments. Fortunately, some agencies are now offering EAP, and you're going to be covering that soon as well, coming up.
Wonderful.
We have an interpreter who is also an actor. I have had many of these feelings as an actor too. I have used a lot of this situation through my interpreting life. But in one situation, in an emergency case in the hospital, that I feel has left me a bit traumatic. It was the same time when I lost my mother, and this situation was in a very similar case. My mother died. I have never been able to get it off my mind, but I completed the emergency as a professional interpreter. And I think that's what you were referring to when you were saying there was, it doesn't have to be always repetitive. If you have some underlying issues emotionally, and then this comes on top of that, it can also be vicarious trauma. Am I right in saying that?
That's correct. Yes, Fatih. So thanks for sharing the story. Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Michael.
All
right. So 66% have said yes. So 34% thinks no. So that's still a pretty big percentage. That's almost that's a third of the attendees.
That's a third, precisely a third. All right, so thank you for answering the question. And this is precisely what I wanted to talk about. The answers also reflect what we found in our research, in the sense that some interpreters said to us, look, we understand that we need to reach out and all that. However, I'm bound by confidentiality. I'm a really ethical interpreter, therefore I cannot talk to people. Okay, so I suppose for those of you who answered yes, congratulations. And for those of you who said no, I completely relate to why you said no. But then here is the message. Let me get back to my slide. All right, so what I really wanted to share with people is that there is a misconception in the field, okay, that interpreters must behave impartially. Of course, we need to behave impartially, or sometimes we say we behave neutrally. We don't favor any side of our clients. Yes, indeed, we need to behave impartially. However, the misconception is that because we need to behave impartially, therefore, we also need to feel impartial. How do people feel? It is impossible for us to feel impartial, one would think. Is it possible for us to even feel impartial? Behaviorally, of course, we all know of the code of ethics inside out. Therefore, yes, we do need to behave impartially, but then it is virtually impossible for us to feel inside impartial. It's impossible. Therefore, can we talk to people? Of course, we can talk to people. We can talk to people, but at the same time, guard against confidentiality, which we value really, really. That's, we cannot breach confidentiality for sure, but then can we talk to people? Of course, we can talk to others as long as you do not breach your confidentiality. So I might go to my question here. When you talk to people, what can you talk about and what can't you talk about? Of course, what can't we talk about is the details of the case that you interpreted for, people's names, people's circumstances, the stories and all that. You don't talk about that with the people that you talk to. However, when you talk to people, talk about yourself, talk about your feelings, talk about your thoughts, talk about your outlook, talk about how you are going to get out of this low. Okay, so you can talk, and it's a matter of what can you talk about. So we've said that you do not talk about the case details and all that, but concentrate on you. You can very well talk about yourself, your feelings, your thoughts. Now, coming back to who can we talk to? There is absolutely nothing wrong for you to talk to your colleagues, your peers, talk to your professional groups, group members, your networks. Sometimes in our research, a lot of interpreters told us that they talk to their family members, their partners, nothing wrong with it. Again, as long as you guard against confidentiality, you comply with confidentiality, there's nothing wrong for you to talk about your feelings. Of course, one thing you also have to pay attention to is you can talk to your family members or friends. We have friends here. You can talk to friends. But on the other hand, you also don't want to dump your emotional baggage. Yeah, indeed, emotional baggage on your spouse, your partner, or your friends so much that they start to feel a bit traumatized. Okay, therefore, I think there is a line to draw, and that's why later on it is important for us to then talk about some tips, self-help tips, and also how to reach out for professional help. Okay, sometimes some of you might be religious, therefore there might be some community resources. For example, you might find comfort in religion. By all means, do that. Or you might want to go for more professional help by seeing counselors or therapists. Okay, so the message here is really, for sure, you can reach out and you can talk to people as long as we remember our confidentiality about your client's case. But then by all means, talk about yourself, your thoughts, your feelings and all that. That's very important to look after your mental health. All right, now this is time for us to get to the tips to share with you in terms of maintaining your well-being. So these are a few, points that I think are easy and then straightforward for us to share with each other. First of all, goes without saying, I've said that in the previous slide, please make connections. It is so important. So make connections with others in the field, with your peers, your mentors, your teachers, or through your professional networks, associations, etc. The second bullet point there, it might be a good idea to have some work preparation strategies. For example, ask about the nature of the assignment so that you can prepare for the assignment mentally, and also you prepare for the context. Yeah, so mental preparation is very important, just so that you know, okay, today I'm going into this psychotherapy session and it's going to talk about war crime or something. Then you are mentally prepared. Of course, I mean, in some situations, some of you might opt for not taking the assignment. That's completely legitimate. For others who want to challenge themselves, then my message is, look, before you go in the assignment, mentally prepare for it. As well as, I mean, we've all talked about preparing for your assignment, I think more from the technical point of view. You prepare for the contextual knowledge, you prepare for, the terminology, but then we very rarely talk about preparing for the mental distress. So that is something I think is helpful. By understanding the nature of the assignment that you are going to undertake, and then you go in with your eyes fully opened. That's the message. The third bullet point there, have your work clothes that you only wear to your interpreting assignments. I mean, we all have to dress appropriately to our interpreting assignments, goes without saying. But when you get home, why don't we immediately change our work clothes into our home wear? Okay, just so that you can very clearly demarcate your work from your personal life. It's just a strategy. Yeah, sometimes people take off their work clothes, have a shower, feel relaxed, and then you can enjoy your family life. Yeah, so something along those lines. Next bullet point is, after the assignment, this is so important. Wherever possible, try to ask for debriefing on site. Okay, wherever possible, please do so. Professionals who we work with these days, more and more, I find that are all very empathic of the work we do for them. We are a team of service delivery, okay? We are an equal colleague of the service delivery team. Therefore, doesn't matter whether it's the social worker or the therapist, counselor, psychotherapist, ask them to debrief you if you feel, emotionally distressed or disturbed. Ask for them. Next point there, think about the last 2 points are the strategies, I suppose, more for yourself to rationalize the things that you've just been through in terms of your interpreting assignment. Think about what you have interpreted in the assignment you've just completed, and think about the person and how you have helped them today. And I'm sure all of you in the audience always feel that. And that's precisely why we love doing it, because we feel a sense of satisfaction helping people. So once, when you come out of the interpreting assignment, think about how you have helped them today. Okay, so a bit of positive thinking. The last point there is to remind yourself that this is work. So this relates to what I was saying. You have to demarcate work from your personal life. Okay, so remind yourself that this is work and it's not your personal issues. As much as we empathize with your client, as much as we really want to help them, at the end of the day, that is not your personal issue. Okay. You can also reflect on any similar issues that you have come across yourself in your personal life and identify how you yourself are different from whatever you've been through, whatever you interpreted for today. Okay, so these are a few tips for you to maintain your mental well-being.
Just on that, I've got a couple of comments and questions, yep. Miranda. Mm-hmm. I've got a comment here from a practitioner. My first telephone interpreting assignment was interpreting for a 12-year-old who was abused. I have children, and interpreting the traumatic event the child went through was too much for me, so I started crying. I asked the professional if they could give me a couple of minutes to compose myself. I quickly thought of using the different hats idea that they taught at my children's school. I put on the interpreter hat. It helped, and I've been using it since. It helped me to play the role of an interpreter, and when I finish, I take the hat off and I'm done. It's a strategy I use to protect myself. This is because I don't want to take it home with me or break any client confidentiality.
Thank you so much for sharing the story. It really is a good strategy. I think later on, I also have a very similar a slide which talks about a similar strategy, but no, it's a really good example to share with us. So thank you so much for
Yep,
sharing.
thank you. If I get tears in my eyes during my job, does that mean that I'm not professional? I guess we're talking about we can behave impartially, but we can't feel impartial. So we are only human if we get tears in our eyes when we cry, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think asking for a few moments of break so that you can compose yourself, that's absolutely spot on. That's what you should do. Yeah. So again, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And just a couple more, if you don't mind.
No worries.
Agency doesn't tell us the nature of the assignment beforehand. Once I had to go to a high security forensic mental health hospital, but I was not told. All right. So
Yeah,
usually I'm not sure
indeed.
if the job offers don't provide a lot of information, but is it up to us to get as much as we could from the agency, or should the agency give a notification, a warning or something? What are your thoughts?
Um, I absolutely believe this is mutual. Okay. The more we ask, if we don't get a lot of information from our assignments, the more we ask, the more in the future agencies would modify the amount of information they give you. Yeah. Therefore, I think by all means, every single assignment, in theory, you should ask for more information if you feel that the information is not enough. And on the interpreting agency side, I think there is also the need for us to advocate that, look, particularly when we consider this vicarious trauma issue, there is a duty of care in terms of providing sufficient information for our interpreters so that they go in, like I say, mentally prepared, not just preparing for the terminology and the contextual knowledge. We need to be prepared mentally, emotionally. That's very important. So yes, indeed, I think it's mutual. If you feel that you haven't got enough information from your interpreting assignment, by all means, ask the question. And sometimes I believe interpreting agencies, they probably wouldn't have the information either. Then they have to go back to their client and then get the information for you. But the more we do it, the more in the future they would automatically get the information for you. So you don't need to ask for it in the
That's
future.
right.
So
Agencies don't offer free counselling or debriefing. I think you're going to be commenting on
I'm
this
going to
soon.
talk
There's
about it
something
because it's
coming
so
up.
important. Yeah.
Yes. So that might be a misconception, which you'll tell us about.
Mm-hmm.
More tips to maintain well-being, like physical exercise, practice mindfulness, expose yourself to positive news, people, goodwill of people, etc. I think you've got some things coming on that too. And I've got
That's
another
right.
comment here. I feel that the stress has become part of the job, or at least it is considered in this way among colleagues.
Mm. I have to say that, look, these days, there is no job under the sun that doesn't come with stress, I would say. Therefore, yes, stress is indeed part of any jobs, but then the point is to be aware of it and then to know yourself and know the level of exposure, to know the signs when you are distressed and then do something about it. The best thing is to prevent it. And that's why we are talking about it today. Yeah. So, yes, we have to accept that stress and particularly emotional stress is actually part of our job. However, there are ways for us to mitigate the impacts of that aspect of our job. I suppose that's the message. Now, very quickly, because I know we are running to the end of the session. Yes, indeed, there are many things we can do. Therefore, my message is that pick something that will work for you. If you are a person that enjoys physical activities, do exercises, or if you are probably a bit more introvert person, then you might want to set aside quiet time for yourself. If you enjoy cooking, you can take up cooking, or you enjoy doing, handicraft or writing or singing or anything that you enjoy to do, then it's kind of personal. Pick something that will work for you. You can go to movies if you are a movie buff, but these days I suppose we don't go to a movie theater anymore. Anyway, so pick something that will work for you. I think that is the message. Now, very quickly, because the lovely story shared by the audience member talking about putting different hats on. In the acting field, they, again, in recent years, started to see that, yes, indeed, actors might also be prone for vicarious trauma because they, some actors might continuously portray human suffering, distress, violence, or, all the negative kind of human cruelties. Therefore, they've come up with these techniques to de-role from the role they play. We've always said that, oh, so-and-so is a very good actor because they get in the role so well that it's very believable. Now, on the other hand, when these actors get in their role, finish their shooting, what do they have to do when they finish their shooting? They have to get out of the role. They have to de-role, and the term is de-rolement, okay? So they need to get out of the role and then go back to their personal life, yeah? So there are some techniques shared by the acting profession. They say that when you finish shooting the scenes today, you can literally shake your limbs and body to literally shake the character off, okay? Or you can ritualistically step out of the performance by handing back a character's prop or costume to the director. That's also a kind of a technique. Now, you see, I've got a couple pictures here. You might ask me, Miranda, what are you doing? Showing us the Joker and the Dark Knight. So what I wanted to say is that people probably know this brilliant Australian actor, Heath Ledger, who played really well this Joker's role in The Dark Knight in 2008, I think. And he was awarded, after his death, the 2008, the Academy Award for the Best Supporting Actor. When the movie came out, he was already deceased. Why? Because of a drug overdose. Yeah, people speculated the reason why he had an overdose. The main reason people say was that he was unable to get out of the Joker role that he played. So the reason why I wanted to share this story is to say to you in the audience that yes, indeed, we need to get in the role when we interpret for our clients, because we need to be able to empathize with them and then convey the story the way they want conveyed. But then when you get in, you need to get out. Okay, so that's the message for you. Self-care strategies, I think I might skip that. And then I just wanted to talk about the Employee Assistance Program as the last point here. Employee Assistance Program, or EAP in short, is provided by every single major, I have to add the word, major interpreting agencies, okay? 5 years ago, when we did our first research study, out of the many major interpreting agencies, we knew only one which provided employee assistance program. But these days, if you look across all these interpreting agencies, every single one of them provided, okay? You only have to ask, all right? Some of them actively promoted, such as OGRADs, good on OGRADs. Others, they might cover it in the induction program, but then if they don't promote it, rest assured, they all have it. So please use it. Now, what is EAP? EAP is independent and external to the interpreting agency. They are counseling. They are people who provide counseling, debriefing, and well-being support. So these are services that interpreting agencies purchase, okay? To you as employees to these interpreting agencies, it is free. So please use it if you need it. So as interpreters, you are entitled to use the EAP services provided by the agency, which employs you to go to this particular assignment. So after a particular assignment, if you feel distressed, then go and use the EAP service this interpreting agency provides, okay? If you don't know, ring them up and they will hook you up with the EAP service. Now, a lot of interpreters said to us in our study that, oh, I'm hesitant to use it because once when I access the EAP service, one, the interpreting agency might find out, oh, I've accessed it, and therefore they will think, oh, you know, you probably are mentally distressed, therefore we will give you less work. The message here is that please don't be hesitant in using it, because these EAP programs, they will not tell the interpreting agencies who have accessed their services. That's the rule, okay? They would pay the interpreting agencies for whatever services they provide to interpreters, but they cannot tell the interpreting agency that, oh, Miranda came to me yesterday seeking for some assistance. They cannot tell the interpreting agency, okay? So interpreting agencies pay for them, but then they will not have access to whoever access the service, okay? So I hope this reassures people that please feel free to use the program. They are there for a reason. They are there for you to access when you feel distressed. So I think I might, because I don't want to go over time, I might use this as the last message for my talk. There are resources I want to provide to people. So after the session, I'll send it across to Fatih, and then it can be shared with people there. The last quote I want to share with people as the ending for my talk today is, and I like it a lot. This is a doctor in the US who said this: the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. How do people think? I think it describes what we do very succinctly, and then it kind of reminds us, look, you know, you go to your interpreting assignments. Sometimes, like I say, it might be happy occasions, but a lot of times it might be distressing. Expecting us to be able to do this day in, day out without being touched, without being affected, it's unrealistic. We have to take it as part of our job. But what do? On the other hand, we have to be aware of the possibility of acquiring vicarious trauma, but most importantly, knowing about it, be vicarious trauma informed would help you from not getting it. And if you get it, you know where to find assistance, and the best is not getting it. I think that's the message. All right, handing the floor back to Fatih.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miranda Lai. Please, if you have any questions and comments, put them through on the chat screen there. Now, we didn't have time to go through your research about vicarious trauma. Having said that, if you could kindly provide us with your research, I will be more than happy to send it out to our attendees today so they can read up on it. Because there was some very recent findings, I believe, which are very interesting. Also, something from 5 years ago as well, which is also very, very relevant still. So I am sure that Dr. Miranda will share those with us, and we will send those studies out to you so you can have a little bit of a read. And hopefully get a little bit more information on that research. Some comments coming through. I check the assignment and I look up the address, for example, a correctional facility. I think of my safety, so I prepare myself by ringing the contact person and asking if there's parking, best way to enter, etc. I was told to meet at the staff door and park at the staff car park. You have to take the initiative, especially when your safety is a concern. So if this practitioner had not called up and said, you know, what can I do? I'm coming there as an interpreter, she would not have had access to the staff parking. So they took care of her. She called up. So you got to use your initiative. If you can't, like you were saying earlier, I think it's a mutual thing that, you know, if there's not enough information there, or if you think there could be something that needs extra consideration, just you can call up the facility or the agency and get extra information. Is that right?
Precisely. And good on the practitioner for doing so. That's excellent.
Well done. I've got another one here. I used a very similar situation and technique as an actor and as an interpreter, which has greatly helped me through my acting to shake after I finish a role. Interpreting has greatly helped me through a lot that way. I love this job, but I can distinguish there are moments of my personal feelings and reality for that moment. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you.
What happens if I say no to the assignment at the prison and if nobody goes there to help the non-English speaker?
Precisely. In our first study, indeed, 40% of our respondents actually told us that because of the traumatic client materials and the impacts on me, 40% of the interpreter respondents told us that they would not in the future take the similar interpreting assignments. Now, for some languages where the number of interpreters, qualified interpreters, is abundant, then that might be less of an issue, because if you don't do it, others might be able to take it up. But then for other languages where you don't have enough qualified interpreters, or it is a very small community, you've only got this handful of interpreters. If 40% of them say, no, I'm not going to do this, then actually the community suffers. Yeah. I think on a personal front, by all means, if you want to protect yourself, by all means, reject the interpreting assignments that you think you are not emotionally prepared for. But I suppose probably more colleagues in the audience are, I suppose, don't really have the freedom to say, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. Then at the end, what do you do? Interpreting assignments don't come like, like for some languages, it comes maybe very sparsely. Therefore, you can't afford to be too picky. Yeah. So it probably is a mixture of how you look at your work and how you want to look after yourself. There is no straight, black or white answer. It really depends on what you value more and how you want to look after yourself, either emotionally or financially, or a bit of both. If you look after both your financial and also your emotional front, then at the end of the day, I suppose it is like what we were saying, you've got to have some strategies to guard against possible emotional harm in the course of your work. That's just the way it is.
I think where it starts off is having awareness that this can happen and it's okay
Exactly.
for it to happen, and just being aware of vicarious trauma, and then being aware and knowledgeable of its signs and impacts.
Hmm.
So hopefully now today, I
Yes.
definitely now know a lot more than I did
Mm.
an hour ago.
Hmm.
Just being aware of its existence, and then looking out for
Exactly.
signs, and then knowing that there are things that could be done, some strategies. All
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
And like you said, we can't keep saying no to every job, but
You
maybe
can't.
one, maybe on a day where we're not so emotionally challenged, we take that job, we prepare for it, we build up our arsenal towards going there.
Hmm.
And then there could be some days where we are not, we are emotionally tired already. We could have had a
Hmm.
few challenging jobs throughout the week, and maybe we don't want to
Precisely.
take that last one, you know
Exactly. Yep.
because there's a fine line that you really got to balance out, saying no to those jobs, because like
Mm.
you said, in some languages it is very sparse, or during some times of
Exactly.
the year. I'm a practicing Turkish interpreter. When it comes to June, July, August, there's no jobs around because everyone goes back home. So
Oh,
you know
there you go.
even
Yeah.
even if you do want to take those jobs, they are very sparse, like you say.
Hmm. 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 If I could just add in one last point, if I could, Fatih.
Please.
um, I talked about people need to be alert but not be alarmed because the incident rate is not that high. Awareness is the key. And then the last message here is that we talked about vicarious trauma, but then in recent years, this is only in the past, 10 years, people started looking into vicarious growth. And you might ask me, Miranda, what does that mean? Now, imagine, I'm sure a lot of you have this experience where, particularly if you have a client that you interpret for a longer period of time, you see this client maybe in for example, a social work context. At the very beginning, the client was distressed and needed help, and then along the way, the social worker helps the client and you interpret for the client, and towards the end of the assistance, this client has come out from the trauma or the sadness or whatever challenges in this client's life, and then emerge as a new person, has a new outlook for the person's life. What do you feel as an interpreter? You feel enormous sense, big smile, yes? You feel enormous sense of satisfaction. Now, of course, we talk about, therapists or, helping professions, interpreters get vicariously traumatized. But remember, we can also get satisfaction or joy or growth similar to the growth experienced by the client themselves. Okay, so studies these days have turned to try to find the vicarious growth that we are able to gain from our jobs. So this is, I suppose, probably a more joyful aspect of our life. But I have to say that, like I say, we don't normally have the luxury of interpreting for the same client from the beginning to the end. Normally, it might be a different interpreter, every time in a particular context. But then if you have the opportunity, I know that in some contexts, for example, in foundation house, they normally prefer for the same interpreter, if possible, to interpret for the client from the beginning to the end, if possible.
Hmm.
So in that sort of situations, it is possible for practitioners to experience the growth, the client experience, and we experience it vicariously. And that will be such a joy. So, that's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel of our work in some
So
situations, not in all.
yes, it's not all doom and gloom. So I think
No,
that's really important to point out. Yes, there is vicarious trauma, but I'd never heard of it. But there's also vicarious growth
growth.
as well.
Mhm,
Look,
mhm.
yeah, and now that you mention it, there are those times when you just interpret for the same cold client, and you know, you do end up with a massive smile after the end of that treatment, or after the end of their treatment period, you know,
That's
and
right.
you can see their growth, which automatically affects you as well. That's and we can build on that too. It's not just always the negative.
Precisely. That's a really good way of putting it.
Dr. Mirandalai, thank you so much today for giving us information about vicarious trauma. And I think I definitely have, and I believe that my practitioners and colleagues out there will definitely have benefited from today as well. And like I said, hopefully you'll share your research with us, and I'll be able to send that out to our colleagues, where they can have a little bit more of detailed, some light weekend reading.
That'll be good.
All
Excellent.
right.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And we'll actually see you in a few weeks' time for another webinar. Dr. Mirandalai will be back, and we'll be talking about ethics for police interpreters and translators, which you have also published a book on. So we'll talk particularly about that too. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. A great turnout. Just a reminder, you will be getting a link to the recording of this webinar. So if for whatever reason you arrived late, you had connection issues, or you had to leave early, for whatever reason, you will be sent out a link to the recording so you can access it whenever you like. So that is for you to keep, and also your certificates of attendance will be emailed out to you by the end of the week. Again, thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for your input, your questions, your comments, and we'll look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Don't forget to check out our website, which is conversationsallgraduates.arlo. We will be sharing that with you as well. More upcoming webinars for you, as well as accessing previously delivered webinars. You can access the webinars on demand as well. So have a look there. It's we've just started 6 months ago or so. So the webinars are building up there. So hopefully in time there'll be much more in our library that you can access. Again, thank you so much for attending to all our colleagues tonight, and thank you so much, Dr. Mirandalai.
My pleasure. Thank you to you all. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.